How you going? Here we are at Collards. We are today going to have a look at the Avalon Vacuum Tube Vt-737SP, otherwise known as an Avalon Preamp. Quite simply, we're going to look at all the different parts of it and how it works. It's very much like a channel on a mixing console, where you have your input gain, you have some compression, which isn't normally on a mixing console, but your EQ and your output as well. So let's go through it. Starting from the left-hand side, my favorite way is usually to just address every single button on the unit as you go through. Sometimes you have to jump back and forth, but quite simply, you are going to be adjusting all the different aspects of this to get the sound that you desire. So, the very first one is your preamp gain. So we have this microphone plugged into the back, into the microphone input, and right next to our preamp gain here we have the microphone. So this thing won't actually work unless that is set correctly. So at the moment we have it set on mic. If I turn it to instrument, if I turn it back to line, I was saying you will hear nothing obviously because you would have heard nothing. So basically that's set correctly. This is our input gain. If I turn this down, the sound will get quieter obviously. If I turn it up, we're going to get more input gain. Now, as I'm talking, we can watch the levels on our VU meter here and make sure that we're not peaking out. If I speak loudly, we don't want it to actually peak out at the top there. So, let's move on through our buttons. Our next one that we have here is a high pass frequency that we can set. So this also actually has an on switch, which there is called filter. So a high pass frequency is a filter where it's taking out the low frequencies. We quite simply push that in and then determine what frequency we want to have this set at. So if I have it on 30, it's only cutting out frequencies below 30 hertz. If I turn it right up, it's at 140, it's cutting out. You're probably hearing a little bass, a bit of bass disappearing out of my voice there. So that's that one. Now, a few more switches here. If you do have a very quiet signal that you need to bring into the unit, you can quite happily press down this high gain switch, which will give you a lot more input gain and make things much louder. We won't use that for today though. So, the next one we have here is a phase reverse button. So if you're using two microphones on a particular source and you're getting phase cancellation or complete phase reversal, you can hit the REV button there, which will basically reverse the phase. Obviously today there's only one microphone, so it won't really make any difference. Now, plus 48 volts. This is obviously to turn on phantom power. Now, phantom power is what you need for your condenser microphones to make them work. You can turn it on with a microphone like a dynamic, an SM58 like I'm using. It won't actually cause any problems. But if you're using a ribbon microphone, don't flick that switch. So, next in line, we have a compressor. So we have pretty standard controls here on the compressor, the threshold, the compression, which is obviously known as ratio, as it says underneath there, and then your attack and your release. Now, have to press that button to actually activate it and put it into the signal chain, and then you can set how much compression you like. This button next to it will change the meter from being from just level, going from 0 upwards. It will go, or going from infinity upwards, it'll start at 0 and then it will come down as soon as I have a threshold level where it's going to get compressed. So bringing the threshold down like that will mean that it gets compressed more and more. Having the threshold up means the signal doesn't actually hit that threshold. So we'll switch that out for the meantime and take it off the viewing compressor mode. This last little button in this section is basically, do you want to have the EQ section go before the compressor? So it's like EQ with a little arrow towards the comp part there. Attack and release you will set as desired for whatever instrument. We get to our last section, one of the most fun ones, where we have EQ. Quite simply here, we can turn this EQ in or out with the EQ in button on the side there. And then we have frequency selectors at the bottom. And then we have how much gain we want to either add or take away from the signal. So things like this bottom frequency here, it's a shelf. The top one is a shelf as well. If I set this shelf at 150 hertz and turn it up, it will be boosting all the frequencies below 150 hertz. If I turn it down, it'll be taking out all the frequencies below 150 hertz. Let's leave that one back at the center. Now, the same sort of a thing shelf-wise with the highs here. If I set this at 10K, you'll probably hear a lot of sibilance increase on the microphone. It'll get very sibilant. If I reduce it, it should sound very dull. Lose the clarity in the voice, obviously. So, the mids here, these have a special little button underneath where you can change the frequency. So at the moment, see this particular one is set at 150 hertz. If I press that times 10 button, it will be now at 1.5K. So it times that frequency by 10 so that you can adjust different aspects with each of these different settings here. The little high Q button there will basically give it a higher Q, make it a more narrow bandwidth to adjust. So I could leave it at 150, turn up 150 hertz. Pressing that would mean that I'm actually now turning up 1.5K, and this would change the bandwidth, how many frequencies I'm turning up around that center frequency. So that's your EQ. The very last one here is this particular button is basically a sidechain to mids. So this particular button is going to allow that we can determine how the compressor works by using the frequencies that are here. So if I want to make the compressor react to 2K, I could set this particular part there, turn on the sidechain to mids, and increase that particular frequency there, and that the compressor will now react to that frequency as a induced EQ curve. So last button on the machine we have here is the output. So the output is quite simply the total volume after everything you've done. So if you've reduced the volume with your compressor because you're compressing the signal down, you might end up boosting it up again with the output there. And that's it. It's a beautiful little unit. It's quite simple. You don't have to use the EQ. You don't have to use the compressor. It's going to sound good almost no matter what you do. They're very sweet sounding units. They're very polished and nice sound come out of them. So enjoy.